Have you ever heard a story that just doesn't quite add up? A pattern that seems way too perfect, way too strange to just be a coincidence? Well, some stories seem to whisper that the reality we all take for granted might have a few loose threads. And today, we're going to pull on one of those threads. Okay, so let's just dive right into this because it's a wild one. On the left, you've got a scene from an Edgar Allan Poe novel written way back in 1838. On the right, a real-life event that happened 46 years later. In both stories, you have shipwrecked sailors who do the absolute unthinkable to survive. But here's the part that'll give you chills. The victim, in both the book and in real life, was a cabin boy named Richard Parker. Seriously, that is the anomaly we're exploring today. So we're going to start with this central mystery, a story that feels less like some dusty historical footnote and more like a glitch in the fabric of time itself. The real-life story is just harrowing. You have four men, their yacht sinks, and they escape into this tiny lifeboat with basically no food or water. After 19 days lost at sea, starving and desperate, three of the men make a terrible, terrible decision. They killed the fourth crew member, a 17-year-old orphan who was serving as the cabin boy, Richard Parker. 5 days later, they're rescued, but their story leads to this huge murder trial that actually changed maritime law forever. So you see, this isn't just about a tragic shipwreck. It's about this impossible echo between a story somebody made up and something that actually happened. It's a bizarre, reoccurring coincidence that really makes you stop and question the whole idea of random chance. What if some patterns we see aren't random at all? Okay, so that single, strange, historical echo, that's just our starting point. Now we're going to zoom out and look at an entire worldview that's built on seeing the patterns of history laid out in advance. We're going to explore the prophecies of the Hopi people. So, take a look at this. This is Prophecy Rock, carved into a cliffside in Arizona. Now, for the Hopi, this is not just some ancient drawing. This is a map. It's their visual guide to a spiritual story, where history isn't just a chaotic mess of events, but a foretold journey. A journey with very clear warnings and a very specific path. Let's break down the story that's being told on this rock. You've got the Great Spirit offering humanity a choice between two paths. The lower path, the spiritual one, gets interrupted by two great shakings of the earth, and many people have interpreted those as World War I and World War II. The prophecy warns that there's a final chance to get back on that spiritual path before something called the Great Purification, a time of huge, immense change for all of us. And the warnings? Well, they get even more specific. There's a story of a Hopi elder who shared 9 signs foretelling the end of what they called the Fourth World. The signs talked about men with thunder, guns, spinning wheels filled with voices, covered wagons, snakes of iron, railroad tracks, a giant spider's web covering the land, power lines, and this one is wild, a dwelling place in heavens that would fall with the Great Crash. A prediction that sounds an awful lot like the fiery crash of the Skylab space station back in 1979. So this brings us to a really fundamental question, doesn't it? Is it just easy to make prophecies fit events after they've already happened? A little bit of creative interpretation? Or are we looking at some kind of ancient blueprint? A totally different way of understanding time and destiny. All right, so we've gone from the spiritual and historical, and now we're going to pivot to the modern, and frankly, the bureaucratic. Because today, the battle over what's real and what's not isn't being carved into rock. It's being fought with paperwork. There's this concept called administrative paving, and the idea is that in our modern systems, the official record, the file, the data point, your digital footprint, it actually becomes more real, more important than the actual person or event it's supposed to be describing. It's like reality itself gets paved over by the record. And this slide right here shows that clash in action. The state, the government, has its official labels for you. You're a U.S. citizen, maybe you're labeled an anti-government extremist, but the sovereign citizen movement, they completely reject that reality. They create their own language, their own aliases, like Freeman on the Land, because they believe they're operating in a separate, more authentic reality. So how do they fight the state's reality? Well, not with guns, but with paper. Lots and lots of paper. They engage in what the FBI has called paper terrorism, just flooding the courts with bizarre, nonsensical legal filings to completely jam up the system. They are literally trying to pave over the government's reality with their own. And these examples really highlight the danger when that record gets totally disconnected from what's actually happening. A man named David Parker hid his wife's body, but told police the record was that she was on a cruise. Carly Russell created a totally false record of a kidnapping, which launched a massive manhunt. And then you have the unsolved murder of Shirley Parker. That's a crack in the system, a real tragic event that the official record has just failed to solve. So, we have an impossible historical coincidence, we have an ancient prophetic worldview, and we have a modern war over bureaucratic reality. You might be asking, what on earth do these things have to do with each other? Well, what if they're all connected by red strings? This is where we have to kind of step back and try to see the bigger picture. One perspective out there suggests these are not just random, separate stories. They're all threads in a giant mosaic, clues that might point to a totally different kind of truth. So, what if you looked at all of this, history, prophecy, bureaucratic data, as a kind of flattened archive? Imagine just a massive collection of information where, if you look at it just right, unexpected connections and patterns start to pop out, creating this mosaic of truth that you could only see when you put all the pieces together. So, from this viewpoint, the Parker anomaly isn't just a weird story, it's a historical echo. The Hopi prophecies aren't just myths, they're a spiritual pattern. Administrative paving isn't just red tape, it's a bureaucratic glitch. And the sovereign citizens, they represent a radical rejection of the official story. They're all just different pieces of the same puzzle, a deep, fundamental conflict over what is real. So after chasing all these red strings through history and prophecy and bureaucracy, we're left with one huge question that's really at the heart of all these strange connections. As humans, we are basically pattern-seeking machines. It's just what we do. We find them in the stars, we find them in historical events, and we definitely find them in massive data sets. It's how we try to make sense of the world. But here's the ultimate question, isn't it? Are all these patterns we've looked at today just our minds trying to force order onto a chaotic, random world? Or are they genuine messages, little glitches in the matrix that are pointing to a hidden reality, one that operates on rules we just don't understand yet? Well, one perspective suggests that these anomalies, these strange coincidences and prophecies, are proof that what we call random is just an illusion. This viewpoint argues that they're here to show us a deeper internal truth that's actually guiding events, a logic that's hidden just underneath the surface of the official story. And that's where this leaves us. We've seen how the official story, whether it's written in a history book or a government file, can be incomplete, manipulated, or sometimes just plain wrong. So, if the records we rely on to tell us what's true can't always be trusted, what does that say about reality itself? What is actually real?